Good morning to all and good afternoon to everyone. Well, I will try to speak in the time that we have it. Okay, today I will speak a little bit about the blue economy and the relation with the maritime transport. I will try to make a relation and analysis of what the new regulations are looking forward, and also the the new I will not say the new one. I think that the new scheme that are talking in IMO with in relation with the other organizations. And it's difficult to speak because they don't have a name for that scheme, but we will develop during the presentation. The next one, please. Okay, I can change. Okay. The first thing that I want to remark in this concept is that we have different organizations that have relation in this topic. Today we are speaking on the UNESCO platform, but the last week we was in the IMO GSG strategy, or greenhouse gas emission reduction strategy working group. The next week we will have meetings about the United Nations framework for climate change convention. We today listen a partner from the FAO. Also, we have another discussions that are in the UNCLOS, and we all the days we have meetings and conversations in different UN bodies. So it's important to remark that the blue economy relating to maritime transport have a big involvement in different organizations. So to follow up, we need to take all the information for that bodies and match it, and also work with the national agencies that have responsibilities in different of that bodies, because that is the first problem with when we are going to try or we are going to implement that rules in the national level. What is happened is that most of these bodies have different organizations or national entities that are duly represented. So the first advice is to work together with all the national organizations and know what is happening in different bodies. And that is something that, for example, for us, we are not the representative of any of these bodies. But what we made is talk with the different organizations nationally that represents Panama, for example, in that bodies, and talk with different concepts and participates as advisors or like experts in that groups. This gives us the opportunity to have a big picture of what are the international bodies taking into account, because we need to implement different rules. Now, for example, we are talking about maritime transport and blue economy, but there are some studies that the UNTAC are taking into account for transport of commodities and goods. So we have to make a relation, and that is the first example. Next one, please. In Panama, we have a lot of maritime transport routes that pass through our country, not only because of the importance of our ports in the Pacific and the Caribbean side, but also because most of that vessels transit through the Panama Canal. So when we are talking about blue economy, for us, for Panama, is really important for our economic development, but also to the integration of all the area. What happened is that we have a lot of routes that transit vessels that going forward through Panama, but we are increasing our sustainability, resource and tourism, for example, package, and also we in the last years we are promoting a lot of biodiversity programs, for example, for the whales transit through the immigration, and all the analysis for protect areas like Coiba and other important resource, natural resources that we have in Panama. So when we talk about blue economy, we need to look forward that we are, before we was thinking only in maritime transport. Now we have a lot of different practice that we make in Panama that give the opportunity to economic development, a sustainable economic development to our country. Next, please. As you know, Panama is have the borders with Costa Rica, Colombia, and the Caribbean side and the Pacific side. So it's a good example of a country that have both sides, a lot of traffic of vessels, a lot of opportunity, biodiversity, natural resource researcher programs from NGOs that are based in Panama. So it's really nice because we are making something interesting in spatial marine planning, in blue economy, that I will explain a little more. Next, please. One of our first, I think the first program that we developed as a country was the establish of a traffic separation scheme. And when we talk about separation scheme is, and you think in Panama, we are talking about more than 14,000 transits each year. That were more than 20,000 vessels that going to our ports or transit through the Panama Canal. So it's very a high traffic route. But in that sense, also we have a lot of biodiversity. So one of the first things that we make with not only governmental entities, but also with NGOs like Mitsonia, Marvivan, and other ones in Panama, we develop a traffic separation scheme. That is something interesting because this traffic separation scheme not only talk about the route for the vessels, spatial planning, but also in the period from August to November, the vessel should reduce the speed to 10 knots during the 40 nautical miles before entering the Panama Canal area. So that is a really important thing because that was the first example that we mix a lot of traffic, commerce, vessels with biodiversity, with analysis, scientific analysis, and also the last year we improved that and we add some programs that can calculate, for example, the environmental benefits, additional environmental benefits of that measure from the emission reductions, pollutant gases reduction of the vessel speed reduction during this area of 4 months. Next, please. Also, in the Caribbean, we developed that traffic separation scheme that are something different because when in our Caribbean side, there are some special conditions for anchorage and also for enter the canal and the port. So that is another example of how our countries regionally can make this type of measures and combine our sustainable economic development. That is really, really important because we need to make all the analysis about not affect one of our most economic, for example, resource that we have in Panama, that is the maritime transport, but also protecting the environment and the biodiversity. Next, please. When we talk specifically to the Panama Canal, what we make in that sense, we mix something with a strategy. And this is another lesson that we can plan in every company or in every entity, is to establish a strategy, a document that could make our analysis and the planification for long, short, and mid-term analysis and how we can involve all these concepts of blue economy, biodiversity, greenhouse gas emissions, and environmental and social concepts into one strategy. And for us, we divide in what we do, The first one is our operations, our new projects. The first and most important thing for us is the watershed that give us the water in quality and quantity for make the transits. As you know, the Panama Canal make transit through all water routes, so we depend on fresh water. And the most important is to include the clients. Any measure that we made for sustainable development or spatial planning, we need to include all the stakeholders, because if we make a decision that will not include the client, for example, it will be difficult to implement or will affect all the economy of our area. So it's important to talk, to understand what they are doing, what are the green concepts that they are making. When we get surprised, as most of our clients are, they make measures, for example, for the wells, reduce the wells impacts, for the noise in the ocean, for reduce the speed, and they have good practice. So this is another lesson. We can share that kind of good practice and implement a good program. All the programs that are imposed to the customers, to clients, to stakeholders, they have a big probability of fail. Next, please. So in that sense, we involve all the requirements that we have around the environmental and social aspects, and that is the other thing. Sometimes we think only in what we are doing. For example, emissions reduction. Okay, we only talk about emissions reduction, but when we are talking in a strategy that are looking forward in 2050, for example, we need to understand what are the international and national concepts that will help to develop a good plan. For example, Sustainable Development Goals, Paris Agreement, IMO regulations, IMO initial strategy, the regional regulations, for example, the Wales regulations, the other organizations. And now we are entering, and thanks for being part of this this opportunity, because now we are entering what the UNESCO regulations, for example, and what they are promoting to the spatial planning, because now we are including that concept for the planification in the future. Next, please. In that sense, we are developing a lot of what we call a decarbonization roadmap that include not only the watershed, also the ocean, but also different incentive programs that recognition programs that look forward to include our customers to promote a sustainable watershed, also include the blue economy and biodiversity into the aspects. Why? Because it's really important. We as a country, we depend of the ocean in mostly of our economy. So we need to preserve our oceans. Now we are part of the national oceans policy. As a commissioner, for example, I represent my institution in that. We are working in a new strategy for the national oceans. So we are trying to include everything. Why? Because we have a good practice to promote. We have good programs that have been recognized internationally. And this kind of good practice could be made by different countries, but also by companies. It's really important to include the companies and the stakeholders in this process. This job will be really hard if we only make by the government institutions or the NGOs. We need to work together with everyone. For example, ports, they have a good opportunity to do it. Next, please. We have seen a lot of new change that are happening in the climate and the oceans, the ocean levels, the new routes that they are trying to develop, for example, from the Arctic for other routes. It's important to continue maintaining the international transport being more clean, going forward to decarbonization, and look forward in the technical parts that are discussing in IMO, but also the international transport part, because most of our areas depends in the economical transport from maritime routes and also from vessels. So it's really important to integrate everything into the blue economy. Next. For that reason, we make some different plans to calculate the environmental benefits of using the route of the Panama Canal and Panama in comparison to longer routes, in taking into account, for example, type of fuel, type of emissions, if there is greenhouse gas emissions, or there is pollutant gases, also taking into account different factors for efficiency for vessels, but the most important is including the biodiversity, for example, as I mentioned, the whales program, protection program, the route, and the tourism that is involved in all these activities. Next, please. As you see, most of the stakeholders use these kind of programs and the oceans, for example, to promote the good practice. And this is really important. And another lesson, for example, that we have is if we can integrate the final customer with all the value chain from the maritime transport and the importance of our oceans in that sense, we can promote more easy this kind of good practice, because at the end of every maritime activity, we have a final customer into a value chain. And that is something that other regions are promoting more and more, that our final customer, that our markets ask for environmental benefits, ask for low carbon routes, ask for good practice, and we need, as a region, to promote that kind of practice, to be mostly in the same level of other regions that have ambitious plans for 2030 or 2050. Next, please. Next. At the end, what we do is, for example, we present technical papers to the different organizations like IMO and the other programs that make an analysis of the good practice, but also could be as a reference of a technical paper. And that is really important, because we could have a good practice as a country, as a region, as a company, but the most important part is to write technical papers, to share that technical documentation, how the good practice could be involved, how we also can learn, because all these webinars and workshop give us the opportunity to learn from other people that are making good practice also. Next, please. Next. And next. The next one, please. Yeah. Okay. So what is new? What we can do together? What the region can make? I think the third thing that we need to improve in the region is to data collection. We need to have data. The data is really important to make these kind of programs, to make analysis, to make proposals to the international organisms, and also participate, because we have a lack of data, or we have a lot of data and we don't process that data. So this is the first recommendation that I make, and that is something that we are working here. Use more, for example, data from the vessels, from the satellites, information speed, type of cargo, type of fuel, vessel duration on the sea, and all the information. Include new, for example, efficient ships and emissions from different fuels. So that is really important. We need to put our region in what are the international standards going through, because sometimes we implement when the regulation enter in force, but we have the opportunity to be the big picture, to see all the big picture and implement and make a planning process. That is really important, planification process, to take into account all these new regulations and also participate in that process of the making in the new regulations, promote green programs. I think that the Green Connection program is a good one, but also we are including with the blue economy, with the WELS program by the university, and mix everything. This is really important. And also, as I did, and finally, I think it's really important to begin to talk about green logistics and value added to the cargo. That because at the end, it's important to compare. And if we are talking about oceans and we are talking about transport, maritime transport, we need to talk what is on board that vessels, and that is the value of that cargo, the final customer, and what are the process of that what the vessels are making that cargo. If there are green process, if we as customers ask for more green, low carbon goods, and all this stuff is important to promote that. For that reason, I think that the next future is integrate all this concept of blue economy and also transport with the green logistics and value added, how we promote that. So with that, I think this is the last one, and thank you very much for this little time for explain